Up until now, we've been focusing on the development template, but have not really looked at how you can use it to develop your own projects. The assumption in this video is that you are familiar with JavaScript and jQuery, so we will not actually go into the development of an application from scratch, but rather show you how you can use the template as a starting point, or how to merge your existing projects within the template. In my search of the web, I discovered this website that had a source code for a Tetris game. I modified the code a little bit by changing the CSS and adding some instructions, a header to display the player's name, and a line that will show the maximum scores that a player achieves over time. Right now, neither the name nor the high scores are displayed or recorded, but I thought that this would be a good game to use for an external application. I can store my high scores, levels, and number of lines removed within the app itself, as we have seen with the sample application. All I have to do is plug in my storage variables into this application, along with the session information that will grab the player's name for the heading. So to start, I'm going to use the development template resources by copying the folder over to my project folder and renaming it Tetris. I will now open both my newly named template folder and the modified application that I grabbed from the web into Sublime Text, my code editor of choice. I'm going to first open the app.js file and see what needs to be done. The first thing I do is clear out the app-ready function, as that code is not relevant to my project. This is where I place my Tetris code. Also, for this project, I'm not going to need any configuration data, so I'm going to remove that object from my code along with any reference to the object. So I delete it here in the variables section area, and then find and remove every instance of all references to it. First, we see it's in this test data section. More on this in a minute. So remove it from here. We find it in the process data area, where we remove it twice, and once more in the receive cross-post message function. Now we are left with two storage fields, but I want three. One for the highest level achieved, one for the greatest number of lines removed, and one for the highest score. Currently, we only have two storage fields, and they are not really named appropriately. So the first thing I'm going to do is rename the two object variables to be more descriptive so I can reference them more logically in my Tetris code. With Sublime Text, this is easy. You double-click to select the variable name, and then do Ctrl-D to step through and select all instances. Now I can type and do multi-editing of the selected instances all at once. I'm going to call this field High Score. The default value for high score will be 0. Similarly, I'm going to change the storage field 2 to high lines, so I select it first, do Ctrl-D until all selections are made, and change the name just as we did for high score. The default value for high lines will also be 0. Now we just need to add one more storage field for the maximum level. So I duplicate the high lines object, paste it, change the name to high level. I'll assign it the field ID 10002 and give it a default value of 1. I now need to add references to this new field in 3 locations. In process data, I have to add a case statement to handle a get and an error. I'll add a case at the beginning of each by duplicating the first case statement and pasting it after and changing the name. I then have to add one more reference to the receive cross-post message function, so again I duplicate, paste, and change the name. Now, we will be developing outside of FirstClass until our application is complete. This means that the window event listener will not be triggered, and all that we have done seems to be for naught. However, we have set ourselves up for FirstClass installations, and we do not have to worry about our helper functions anymore. What we can do is uncomment our test data section, and this will simulate what happens when our application launches within FirstClass. I'm not going to do anything different on first or subsequent launch, so I can remove this assignment to the launch type variable. Now, when our application is launched offline, all of the default values are assigned through our declarations. The high score, high lines, and high level object data properties contain our default high scores, and the user object here is populated with our test data. We bypass the start app function since we will be working offline and go directly to the app ready function. The next thing I'm going to do is move the styles.css from our Tetris application to our new Tetris folder. I'm going to copy the HTML from our Tetris application and paste it into my new indexed HTML from my template and replace the existing development template version. In the header, all I have to do is change the reference to Tetris.js to our JavaScript, which is called app.js, and save. I can now return to the Tetris.js and copy everything within the jQuery document ready function and paste it into my app ready function in app.js. Next, I take the remaining code from the Tetris.js file and paste it at the end of my app.js outside of our jQuery document ready function. Now I can test this application offline, and it's working great. The player name and high scores are currently missing, however, so let's use our retrieved user.fname and user.lname to replace the HTML in our player span ID and make sure that max scores, level, and line items display our default scores. In our index.html, we see that we have divs set up as player, max level, max lines, and max score. So all we'll have to do is replace the text in these divs with the values in our variables. So back in our app.js at the beginning of our app.ready function, we can use this code. It simply just pulls the data from our storage variables and replaces the text in each of our 4 divs. Running our application again, we can see that our default data has been inserted into the DOM. Next, we can write a function that checks to see if our current levels exceed the max levels. If so, we can update our data and store it back in the server. We'll run this function every time the score gets incremented, and this happens in the lines_can_strip function within the code, so we'll call it at the end just before the return. Let's call this function checkHighLevels. So let's return to the top of our code, and just after the startApp function, we'll write our function. Let's review our index.html file first before we look at this code. We see that our maximum levels are presented in these 3 divs with our prefix max, while the current game scores are updated by our application and presented in these 3 divs. Our code has to check whether or not the score, for example, exceeds our max score. If so, update max score and save it back to our application form. Similarly for max level and max score. Back now to our code. The author of this application has written all of the functions within the scope of his Tetris prototype, so we're going to have to attach our function to the window object so that we can access our global score variables. All three if statements are basically identical. For the score, we first convert the current score to an integer and compare it to what we have in highscore.data, which also displays the max score div. If it exceeds it, we update our highscore.data variable and update the max score div with this value. Then we use the setData function to send it back to our server for storage. The same process is applied to both the max level and max lines. Now, if we were to test this out right now, we'd get an error. And this is because the setData function, which stores information in the application form, will result in an error since our application is not currently running in FirstClass. So let's comment out these lines right now and test our application. Let me play a little bit and come back once we're about to score. Okay, I've paused the running of the game now, and you can see that the game piece is about to drop and complete the line, which will remove the line and score for the lines removed and increment my score. This means that my max lines will be less than lines and max score less than score, so they should increment. It works. So now we can install our application. First, we have to comment out our test data. And uncomment each of these three setData calls. So here I am logged into FirstClass with my external app source folder open, and I'll just drag my Tetris folder into it. Now returning to the admin desktop, I can open my external applications folder and create a new external application for our game. Let's call it Tetris and make it available to all users. I'll attach an icon that I've designed called icon.png as required. On the Configuration tab, I'll choose Inline Window and give it the dimensions 500 by 650. In the body, I'll type in my iframe code, which points to our Tetris folder in the App Source folder on our website hosted by codathonweb.firstclass.com. We save this, and now we can log in as one of our users to test. Here I am logged in as Emily, and I can see the Tetris game available to me here with my custom icon. I launch the application and see that it recognizes and displays my name. I also see the default values for our max scores match our initial values. So let's play. Okay, the game is over, and I see that I have not gone past level 1, but I have updated my max lines and max scores. These should be remembered as they were saved to our application form and should be displayed on our next launch. I exit the application and launch it again, and sure enough, my max scores are loaded and displayed. This completes the introduction to external application development for FirstClass. In the next video, I'll share with you some resources that will be helpful to you in learning more and being able to start developing your own applications.